Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New Orleans Jazz Museum. I'm here my name is Saskia. I'm here as a representative of the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Park that is just down the street. I see you guys came from there. Good to have you here. We sponsor these Thursday programs here at the Jazz Museum as we have a beautiful collaboration with the Jazz Museum as two national and state entities that are focused on preserving New Orleans jazz in the city where it was founded. Really important work. And today, our program is going to be led by Mr. Fred Kasten right here, who will be interviewing the Larry Sieberth Trio. And I'll leave it to him to introduce everybody and call them all up. But join me in welcoming Fred Kasten and the Larry Sieberth Trio.
Thank you, Saskia. Thank you very much, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here this afternoon. Welcome. By the way, if you'd like to revisit any of today's Talkin Jazz in concert, in whole or in part, it is available, will be available on both the New Orleans Jazz National Historical Parks and the New Orleans Jazz Museum's respective Facebook pages and YouTube channels, so you could check it out. I was recently looking back at an earlier session and realized that at a time of life when most of us are growing out, not up, myself included, I'd recently added 2 inches to my forehead. But I'm still only 6'2", can't figure out how that works. But I do know how this works, ladies and gentlemen. We have the services this afternoon of 3 of the most accomplished, adventurous, and versatile musicians I know, led by an outstanding pianist, producer, and composer, Mr. Lawrence Sieberth. And he's someone whose work I've had the privilege and pleasure of enjoying for 40 years here in the Crescent City. He started when he was 7. So ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk with Larry about his life and career in music some, but we'll also get a lot of music from this great trio. I want you to meet them now. They are outstanding. Beginning with our terrific man on the drums and cymbals, please welcome Doug Belote. Our definitive ace of bass, Mr. Martin Mazakowski. And the leader, terrific pianist, composer, producer, arranger, all-around great musician. Please welcome Larry Sieberth, ladies and gentlemen. The Larry Sieberth Trio. Play. Off you go.
Welcome. So we're going to start with an original. It's called Find a Better Way. And it's somewhat, to my mind, the extension of James Booker composition called Make a Better World.
Yeah. There's Sieberth. Find a better way. Over there on the drums and cymbals, that's Doug Belote, ladies and gentlemen. Doing the terrific work at the bass, Martin Mazakowski. And the man who wrote that tune, played beautiful piano on it, Mr. Larry Sieberth, ladies and gentlemen. You say you based that on, or inspired by James Black's Make a Better World?
James Booker's
James
Make
Booker's.
It Better.
Excuse me, yeah. Got some, my James is confused. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's a pairing that you, I mentioned Black and Booker. You've been involved with their
Yes.
music for a while.
Yeah, we're doing a show tonight at Snug Harbor. It's the music of James Black. And when I was going through my James Black music folder, I found a promotional material for a show I did way back in the 90s called Booker and Black.
Yeah.
And
That was at the CAC?
at the CAC, yes. And John Grabarth was doing video
Right.
projections behind us. And let's see, I remember Troy Davis. It's so hard to talk about how unique James Black was, especially because in order to find a drummer that can maintain
Yeah.
James's reputation, I mean, there's no way for anybody to emulate him, but it's always a challenge to find somebody to represent him as a drummer.
Right.
Yeah.
Or as a composer.
Exactly, yes. And I was fortunate enough to be befriended by James because he was not a friendly guy.
Not just to walk up and start a conversation with a cat.
Yeah,
No.
he had quite a reputation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But well earned.
well earned. Yeah,
Well
a
earned.
great
But,
musician, and
Yeah. I think one of the most significant composers really in the 20th century in New Orleans.
for sure, yeah, he has gained a lot more popularity since his passing.
But they said when Elvis died, smart career move, right?
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Doug Belote, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, I'm hoping for the same.
All right, yes. Building towards something. here.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, let's go all the way back for just a minute. Where are you from? Where'd you first?
Well, I was actually born in Detroit, but my family moved to Baton Rouge when I was 5. And so I guess I've been in Louisiana long enough to be part of the New Orleans community because I moved here to go to college. And I've tried leaving, but I can't.
It's tough, man.
It's just, yeah,
It's like you arrive here, you sink up to your neck in mud, and you get to liking it.
well, for those of you who are not from here, this place is called the Big Easy. It should be called the Big Not So Easy.
For a musician in particular.
Right,
So
yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah.
You're at Baton Rouge. You're 5 years old. Were you into music at that point?
Yeah, my mom was a piano teacher, and my dad was a music hobbyist and composer and pianist, but music to him was not a career choice. He was a lawyer, and when I told him I wanted to be a musician, he was like, "Oh no, son, you're going to spend your life playing late nights in smoky clubs," and he was partially right.
Well, I know.
Until they outlawed cigarettes.
Yeah, right. Then that balcony at Snug Harbor with about a 7-foot ceiling when smoking was allowed.
Right.
It was just
Yeah, or when you could smoke on stage. At
Oh,
Snug
right,
Harbor.
right, yeah.
Right.
was kind of a tough atmosphere. Some things have gotten better,
Right.
but yeah, it's I know I think I've seen you play just about every joint in that I'm allowed in New Orleans.
Well, it started way back when I first moved here. I used to play at a place called the Show Bar for a show called Let My People Come. And
Spelling on that?
yeah, I'd rather not. And then there was a little restaurant that I used to play at, and it's amazing that I got to thank David Torkanowski for turning me onto this gig, but it was at Mamma Mia's Italian restaurant on Bourbon Street with Herb Taylor, Lloyd Lambert, and Liz Gray,
Oh,
the
wow.
Gentlemen of Jazz.
Yeah, that's a great
yeah.
group.
Yeah, I took Eddie, and I can't, Eddie Condon? Was it Eddie, a pianist from here?
Eddie Condon was a guitarist.
Yeah, no, but I think his name was Eddie. But he got killed in a drug deal, so I got a gig.
It's the dark. It's
it's,
darkness. There's darkness in the glory
I mean, it's
here.
New Orleans,
Yeah, right. Yeah. When you're taking lessons from your mom as you started piano?
Yeah,
Was piano what you first played?
Yeah, I played piano and then started in on the clarinet and the bassoon and started writing way back in junior high. And I had some very inspirational musical teachers way back when. Lance Chauvin, Lee Forche, John Dupaquier, James Miller. You know, there was a consortium of very talented, and they were very supportive with my music.
Had you, what kind of, well, let me just ask this as generally, what sort of things, as you're learning to play, were you listening to? A wide range of things?
Yeah. My dad was such that the music room, which had the stereo, 2 chairs, and a piano, was the inner sanctum. It was the sacred space of the house. And if you came in, if my dad was listening to a record, an LP, which is coming back in a way, you know, you had to be quiet. And he loved classical music, but he also loved Oscar Peterson, Bill Evans, and Dave Brubeck. And I inherited a lot of his LP collection, and I noticed that his Thelonious Monk album had probably only been played once. So, but I appreciate that. And from a very early age, I realized that music is more than just music. Mm-hmm. I said it to somebody recently. Music is magic. You know, it's a doorway. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that as you open one door, another door appears that you need to.
Exactly.
Open.
And these doors, as you go through them, teach you a lot more than just music.
Right.
Yeah.
How to deal with life in general.
Right. Yeah.
Is a pretty good lesson that you get from trying to go through those doors.
Right. And, you know, in retrospect, you think, boy, if I knew what I was going to be in for, would I have made this choice? You know, everything's a trade-off, but I couldn't have asked for a better life being a musician.
Yeah. But I've had the pleasure of seeing you in a wide range. In fact, all these players here assembled today, a wide range of you know, presenting a wide range of styles.
Oh, yeah. You know, Doug and I played a show many years ago, and we played the Orange Blossom Special, you know.
Well, he spent years with Jerry Douglas. Right?
I know, yeah. Yeah, Doug and I have been playing for quite a while.
I'm as country as a brown egg.
Yeah, Douglas said he's one of the funniest human beings on the planet.
He is. He definitely is.
And he's as country as a brown egg. But yeah, well, wasn't he a part of the first Voodoo Tech?
Yeah, Voodoo Tech was started many years ago, and it was kind of my foray into the pathway that Miles Davis created when he came out with Live at the Fillmore and Bitches Brew and On the Corner, you know, where music was a melting pot of improvisational ideas that were very much of the moment, you know, rather than of the paper.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time for us to get back to music, but we'll talk a little bit more about that particular thing which you presented at Jazz Fest this year a little later on. I also want to talk some, you've alluded to a few things, but I want to, you first arrived in New Orleans in the 70s.
Well, I arrived, in the 70s, 1974, to go to school at Loyola University. And of course, you know, back then, my options were band director or classical pianist, neither of which was the, plus I was working at night, and some of these classes were at 8:30 in the morning. So it was, I found that if you sat in the last row, you could lean up against the wall and go back to sleep.
Some of the best sleep
Yeah.
that you could get.
Yeah. And what I also learned was, the Miss Cambone especially, who was the music history teacher, would wake me up with a question. And of course I didn't know the answer. I barely heard the question, but I would answer the question like I knew what I was talking about. And most of the other students had just thought I was right just because I had such conviction. So, that's a real musical lesson.
Yeah.
Is conviction.
Play with authority and
Yeah.
conviction.
If you make that, there's no such thing as a wrong note. Yeah,
Just a bad context.
and if you play it more than once, it becomes,
It's a new context.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And 3 times, man, you've got a pattern going.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's funny because I was teaching I taught at Loyola and UNO, and one of my assignments was to take a song, write a reharmonization, and then the other part of the assignment was to write what we call a contrafact, which means you write a new melody over the changes of a very common song. Well, I had one student. He says, "Look, I put my reharmonization and I put my contrafact in the same thing." And I said, "Well, that's like writing a new song. It's like you got new changes and a new melody. I mean, there's no reference to what you started off with." Yeah. Conviction.
Conviction. Yeah. Well, I have said in the past 47 arrests, no convictions, but I'm not referring to myself. But let's have some convincing music. What do you say?
Sounds good. Here's a song that I wrote that I associate with Ellis Marsalis. It's called "One for Ellis."
There's Sieberth, the composer, pianist, Martin Mazakowski at the bass, Doug Belote over there on drums and cymbals, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Larry, let's go ahead and play one more. What do you say?
Okay, I thought I would pull out one that I wrote way, way back when. It was on my first LP, and it's the title track to the LP called Shadow Love.
Okay.
This hasn't been performed since then.
It's time for it to come back. Shadow Love, ladies and gentlemen. The suave brushwork on the drums and cymbals from Doug Belote, beautiful arco bass from Martin Mazikowski, the gorgeous composition and beautiful piano. That's Larry Sieberth, ladies and gentlemen. Larry, that's really pretty. What year was that done?
I think that was done back in the 80s because there used to be a studio owned by Martin's father, Steve Mazikowski, called partly owned CRS. And we recorded that album back then. And I don't think that song has ever been played since that album came out.
It's time for to emerge from the shadow love.
Right, yeah. Right.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Archipelago.
Yeah, Doug played on that.
And your interest in synth and electronic work, and that as an aspect of your musical expression.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued with music from anywhere and everywhere, other cultures, other countries, other eras, and especially music that's moving forward. And back in this early 1900s, electronic music was making its heyday, and I was a big fan of people like Morton Subotnick and a lot of the electronic composers from way back when, and of course Walter Carlos, who became Wendy Carlos, had that album called Switched on Bach, which was pretty amazing to me. And Loyola, when I went there, had a big Moog modular system in a room that I would spend many evenings playing with the wires.
So you got to actually hands-on.
Very hands-on, yeah. And then, of course, I bought a mini Moog, which I wish I would have still kept, because it's worth a fortune now. And owned an ARP 2600, been all through that. And I don't know, I'm kind of getting back into that analog vibe now,
I think the first time I might have heard you play somewhere in the 70s. I don't remember. The first time I remember it was in '84 with Mars.
Right, yeah, and which was also Steve Mazikowski on guitar. And Steve was experimenting with his electronics and the keytar, and I think at that time I had a Fender Rhodes and a synthesizer called a Cat. And then, of course, all the outboard pedal boards and effects processors, which I'm kind of getting back into. Yeah.
Well, for Jazz Fest this year, you presented, was it last year? I can't remember.
2023, yeah.
Yeah, 2023. We haven't had Jazz Fest this year yet.
Right.
Okay. All right. Time travel here, ladies and gentlemen. No extra charge for that. Anyway, Voodoo Tech, which was high energy music.
Yeah, like I said, that was kind of a foray into what I felt is a direction in the future of music, when improvisation can also be addressed with electronics in the mix. Mm-hmm. And a lot of purists don't accept the electronic part of it, but it's becoming more and more prevalent in the new pathways in jazz. Let's say, there's a lot of programming, a lot of sounds, and it's its own universe for sure.
And you were talking about, I think, is with maybe recording Archipelago or maybe performing some of the music live, I'm not sure, or both, that you'd have some pre-recorded tracks, but that you wanted everybody in the band to think of those as improvisational work as well.
Right, that was the idea with the album that we did, and I had created the soundscapes, and the charts for the musicians looked more like maps, and Doug was a part of that, and we started recording that pre-Katrina, and unfortunately all the master tapes were destroyed in Katrina, and so we had to start over again. Wow. But It was a great thing, and this last Jazz Fest, I kind of moved into that direction, keeping some of that spontaneity, but also including a lot of compositional elements. You know, I'm a compositional dictator sometimes.
Well, I've seen you with bands that played almost, from the charts exclusively, and beautiful work.
Well, the idea of the band Voodoo Tech was we had no idea what we were going to play. In fact, the first time we ever played, I think, Doug, you were on that job with Mark Brooks. And yeah, at Funky Butts. And Mark came up and he said, "Man, what are we going to play?" And I said, "Well, you know all those jazz bass lines and those funk bass lines you play?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Don't play any of those."
Hey,
Take
can I
that
say
off the
something? Can I
table
say
right
something
now.
about that night?
Yeah.
Larry, the first time we played that music in front of a crowd was at the Funky Butt, and I think it was 2000. It was actually 2000. And Ken Burns had his series all week long about Louis Armstrong. And I remember, we were about to start playing, and the place is packed. And Larry says, so all of y'all have been watching the Ken Burns thing about Louis Armstrong? Like, yeah, everybody's clapping. And Larry goes, "Yeah, tonight you're not going to hear any of that."
He knows how to warm up an audience, man. So, related but distantly to Louis Armstrong.
No, not really.
Not even that.
No.
Not
No.
not even a fourth cousin.
Just in the respect for the music.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you got to wonder what famous composers and musicians, if they were alive today, what they would be thinking about a lot of the music today. You know, what would Beethoven be thinking about Ioannis Xenakis? You know, because it's always a matter of taste. You know, there's oftentimes when I'm listening to something and I'm going, I don't know. You know, do I like this? I don't know if I like this. It's intriguing. Very oftentimes it can be intriguing.
Right.
But there's a certain connection that I have to want to listen to it more than once.
Right.
And very oftentimes, even some of the performances that I play in the realm of the avant-garde, I'll be on stage going, is this happening or is this just bullshit? You know?
Well, it could be either one.
Yeah, it can't be at the same time.
Yeah. Same tune.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always remembered something the former Times-Picayune, I guess the late Frank Ganyard, music critic, told me about. He was interviewing Virgil Thompson, composer and critic, who had at some point had trashed the Brahms Requiem, which I think the local orchestra was going to be playing. So Ganyard said, "Well, I guess you won't go to that concert the way you feel about the Brahms Requiem." And Virgil Thompson said, "Well, I don't know. I haven't heard it lately." So, things do change.
Right.
Yeah,
Very
your,
true.
Your opinions.
That's
can
very
change.
true. Yeah.
Speaking of change, on the far end of that kind of music, you've been working in recent years with two great artists in their 90s, Germaine Bazzle and Charlie Gabriel.
Yeah, that's quite an honor to have been associated and still being associated with those two iconic, because they grew up in the real era of jazz. Mm-hmm. When I was teaching, I was always telling the students, you have to understand that this music cannot be disassociated from the time and place and era in which it was created, because the music that we are creating now is of our time and of our place. Mm-hmm. And for students, it's very important for you to be conscious of that and to be on the cutting edge of what is current. I shouldn't say it that way. I should say being original is more important than being a repertory musician, where you're trying to regurgitate something that's already been.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that you don't respect, you don't you don't admire, that you don't, or in my case, I steal from any era, any culture. Yeah.
Yes, that old song, young artists borrow from mature artists steal.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's just because you know, oh, you know where your influences are. Yeah. You know where Ellis Marsalis's influence is. I know where Bill Evans's influence is.
You know why your dad only played that Monk record once.
Right, exactly. Yes, that's very, yeah. But I got to say, it's taken me this long to really understand why Monk is so revered. Mm-hmm. And I enjoy being part of that mindset, or having that mindset part of mine as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Another thing that you've done beautiful work on is these sort of package show things. You did work for the casino here for a while. You've done these special shows at Jazz Fest. When did that all kind of get started for you? You're arranging and creating, music directing these bigger, sometimes huge forces.
Well, I guess I would say that it really started when I was approached by a man named Lynn Holdridge, who was an associate producer with Walt Disney. Oh. But he was also a theater teacher at a high school. And he would get these jobs doing these big balls, Mardi Gras balls and stuff, but not here in New Orleans, more in Baton Rouge. And so he hired me to write music for these scripts that he would give me. And he was quite imaginative, and oftentimes very wacky, very wacky. But he really knew what he wanted, and I always have appreciated his understanding of detail, because he would give me these incredibly detailed scripts of what was going on. We did a show for the 300th anniversary of Baton Rouge, and the script started when Baton Rouge was in the prehistoric days, so I had to write music for dinosaurs, and then and it just went on and on through all these French settlers, and I was writing boat music, and then Indian and Native American and Red Stick, and then there were hydraulic lifts, and there were like airplanes and lasers all over downtown Baton Rouge. And so, and a lot of times in these, and I did, gosh, I don't know how many shows. He actually passed away of COVID, which was really tragic, and because he was such a wonderful person. And from that, things started to emerge, and then somehow or another, somebody in Vegas was told that they should hire me as the music director for a show called Red Hats. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and then from that, Bill Johnston, who had been the associated with the Warehouse back here in New Orleans, which I only actually went to once, and that was to see Herbie Hancock and the Headhunters. And so that's when he decided we needed to do our own shows. And that's how I did the Joints Jumpin', the New Orleans Rhythm and Blues show, and the Warehouse Revisited, which was a rock retrospective of all the rock bands that played at the Warehouse.
I was actually there for the opening night with the Grateful Dead, the Flock, and Fleetwood Mac. At the,
what a era that was, and I was peripheral. I was living in Baton Rouge during the hippie days, and, but I spent many a time listening to Jethro Tull and Yes, and Little Richard was my first concert.
Several times,
yeah, Little Richard was the first concert I snuck out and went and saw in Baton Rouge. Little Richard, yeah, Vanilla Fudge, that was a very important period in American history. That's when my civics teacher sent me home for wearing an American flag shirt.
That's a different world than a student's in today.
Oh, yeah, it's very different. Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah. Wow.
Man, amazing stuff there. Also, something you've done that I really admire. We talked a little bit about the Black and Booker, but you've also have, in addition to spotlighting their music, another composer that probably no one had really ever heard of, certainly in that context, Jerome Theriault.
Oh, Jerome.
You
yeah.
did actually what three
Three.
three
He did
CDs of his music, which
yeah.
was he really didn't write until towards the end of his life when he got a diagnosis of cancer that was.
Yeah, he
gonna kill him.
contacted me, and he was in an advanced stage of cancer, and he had been an incredible musician, a very inspirational music instructor, and he had written a lot of music, and he wanted to have it codified. And so I put together a quartet, and we recorded 2 of his jazz albums, and then he said, hey, I got this gospel music with lyrics that I'd like to do too. And fortunately, he gave me a CD of him singing and playing the piano of his songs. And unfortunately, he passed away before we started recording, but his family went ahead and had me finish the project. And it was incredibly great music, you know.
Yeah, really beautiful stuff. And he did live long enough to see you present, I think, the quintet maybe at Snug Harbor.
That was the quartet.
That was the quartet.
Yeah, and one of his iconic people was Alan Toussaint. He loved Alan Toussaint, and at the time I was also working with Alan on a project that Alan had written, and so we did a gig at Snug where we played the music of Jerome Theriault, and Alan came by, and I was able to introduce the two of them to each other, and it was magic, you know.
Yeah.
Music is magic.
Some more of that magic.
Yeah,
we're talking
it
about.
is. It is.
Well, make some magic for us here. With
All
some
right.
more tunes, what you say?
Sure. Love to. And thank you for having me today, Fred. And not that we're finished, but I just wanted to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
You know, another musician that was very instrumental in my development was a bassist named Ramsey McLean. He's no longer a bassist, but I used to live in Ramsey's house in the rear apartment, and Charles Neville lived in the front, and Ramsey lived upstairs. And we were the first band to play at Snug Harbor when it was called the Fallberg, and we would play there from 1 to 5 in the morning, and which I cannot do anymore. But it was with James Black, Charles Neville, Ramsey, and myself. And then Charles started doing more stuff with the Neville, so Tony Dagradi became involved with that. And there's actually a video on YouTube of that group. Yeah, Ramsey, Tony, myself, and James Black. And so this is a tune he wrote called Payday.
All right. Yeah, payday. Yeah, baby. Doug Belote at the drums and cymbals, Martin Mazakowski with the bass work, and at the piano, Mr. Larry Sieberth, ladies and gentlemen. Gentlemen, keep it going. Do another right away.
You know, there have been a lot of influences, not only in New Orleans in my life, but from some very iconic pianists. And one is a pianist named Keith Jarrett. So I'd like to do a song that he wrote called Country.
That's a beauty. Beautiful. Country. Keith Jarrett's Country. Larry Sieberth, ladies and gentlemen, with Doug Belote and Martin Mazikowski. Larry, we have time to talk about just a few more things before the final music. And I want to talk some about three really great records I think you turned out on bands that you lead and in recent times. Estrella Banda, the Musique Visuelle, and An Evening in Paris. Start with Estrella Banda. Let's talk a little bit about that project.
I don't know why, but for some reason I've always been drawn to Latin, African, South American, Central American cultures rhythmically, even before I knew the terminology. Right. I mean, I was playing Montunas before I even knew what it.
That's what that was.
That's what it was. And so I was always writing music in those styles. I think one of the very first albums I ever bought was Antonio Carlos Jobim. And, you know, the orchestrations on those early albums, well, early for me, were so lush and so beautiful. And I've always been drawn to melody. And I've been very fortunate to have had composers that I've studied with which really enhance my understanding and of the beauty of a melody. Mm-hmm. And then the counterpart of that is the rhythm. And you know, I was just in Belize with my wife, and we stumbled across a drum group that we heard in the background, and we were anxious to go see it. And it was a drum school that still exists in southern Belize, which is a remnant from the African culture. It was straight up African. It wasn't Caribbean. And so with that, I've been writing music in Afro-Cuban, Brazilian, Cuban. Haven't really gotten into the bimbas and the plenas, which I was had the opportunity to hear in Puerto Rico, but love that rhythm and love the New Orleans rhythm. You know, I think it's even though my DNA is from Europe, there's I think they call it epigenetics. You know, so you're not a victim of your DNA. You can modify it. Yes. And, you know, your life will influence your DNA structure. And I think that's...
Yeah, we have things we respond to that aren't necessarily
right
down that chain.
Right. Well, you know, it's very interesting. There's a great book, and I recommend it to anybody, especially musicians, but anybody. It's called Towards a Cosmic Music by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. And he talks about how our DNA is all connected. You know, that's why anybody from any culture can appreciate and become immersed, you know, in that moment of listening to music from any other culture in any other time. So Australia Banda is the group that I've kind of umbrellaed with that rhythm, and we're going to be performing at Jazz Fest this year.
Oh, great.
Let's see, that's April 28th, and looking forward to it. I've written some new music for that. We're going to resurrect a few other things from my past, and it'll be great. Really looking forward to that. I'm bringing in Alex Pope Norris from New York.
I know Alex very well.
Yeah, so he'll be joining me
Oh, that's good.
at Jazz Fest.
Wonderful. He's a fine composer himself.
Yeah, well, you know, New York's got a lot to offer. It's not New York. I mean, it's not New Orleans, but
There's some. They got some stuff up there.
yeah, there's definitely some other stuff up there.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I didn't know if we'd ever hear that band again, but it's gonna reappear.
Yeah, it'll be at Snug, it'll be in Baton Rouge, and it'll be at Jazz Fest.
And it was at Snug that you made the live recording
That's right.
that is still available.
Yeah.
Now, so that's samba song is one from that record. I play on my show a lot. It's just a great.
Well, you know, that song was actually on a album I did back in the '90s called Heartstrings.
That's also
Wait,
from
was that
Heartstrings,
on
isn't
there? Yeah, that was on there. I think so. Yeah. I got to say, I've written so much music that I've forgotten when, and sometimes I'll run across a piece of paper and I go, "Oh man, I forgot all about that one." You know.
Yeah.
But it's fun. Music is fun.
Yeah. Did you ever hear something and they thought it was pretty good, but couldn't think who it was and didn't realize it had been yours?
No, but the opposite has happened. I was when I was teaching at Loyola, I helped start the faculty combo, and I brought a tune in, and Tony Dagradi, who was teaching at the time, says, "Man, I wrote a tune just like that," and he played me his tune. I went, "Oh." I better change my tune. So I rewrote my tune so it didn't sound exactly like his tune. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Estrella Banda. Then you did a great record, I think, for piano trio and orchestra, Musique Visuelle, with using a lot of Nashville players.
I used the orchestra in Nashville. Yeah. I had done a project in Nashville, and from that experience, I realized how I could accomplish making this recording, because it's actually pieced together. You know, I use computers, I use technology, I use click tracks, I use sound libraries. I am able to construct what I call computer models of my songs, so that whenever I'm doing something new, I can send somebody, "Hey, this is what it sounds like." And then oftentimes I will and I've done this in the past with this man that I mentioned, Lynn Holdridge, where I spent so much time working on these computer models that they're exact. Because he would have me transcribe Walt Disney classics and make exact duplicates of it, except I would have to throw in Vogue by Madonna, and then some Berlioz from Symphonie Fantastique in the course of his script.
Right.
You know, so I got pretty adept at manufacturing tracks that sounded identical to the originals. And so I was able to do this project by constructing the entire orchestral thing on a computer and then replacing everything except my piano parts and a few orchestral percussion parts, and then I added a few pizzicato strings because there were some Brazilian rhythms that the string players in Nashville just could not, they just couldn't feel it. So I said, well, don't worry about it. I'll just use the string library. and then, but yeah, that was a labor of love that I just had been writing. I don't know why. I just happened to be writing music for piano trio, ethnic percussion, and orchestra over a period of 10 years. And then I did this project in Nashville for another artist that I used to work with, and realized, wow, this is the procedure that I could follow, because Nashville studio musicians are incredible readers. Right. I mean, just unbelievable. And they play together all the time. So, they have this whole mentality and process about how to record written music. So that was quite an adventure.
Yeah, and boy, the results were beautiful, I think. That's highly recommend that one as well, along with the one you recorded most recently in Paris, the An Evening in Paris. Evening in Paris, this always amuses me when I think of the title. That was the number one consolation prize on all the quiz shows of the 50s and 60s, Evening in Paris perfume. And you get a bottle of Evening in Paris.
Oh, well, I never got one.
You got the CD, though, brother.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. And that's a long-time relationship with Jeff Boudreau, but two people you probably hadn't played, maybe never with. But
Right.
much.
I had tried to perform with the saxophonist from Paris, Stéphane Guillaume, who, when I heard him, a recording of him, I just said, man, I got to work this. I got to play with this guy.
Yeah, he's really
And
good.
then, so we were able to put together something with Jeff and Stéphane. I said, man, I need a bass player. And I said, man, what about this guy named Michel Benita who records his music with ECM? And it was magic again.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I sent him the computer models of my material. We had one very short rehearsal. We did the entire album in one day. And the Paris recording number 2 is in the process. It's in the works. All the tracks have been finished, and I just need to mix it. And I added a 5th person to that one, an amazing percussionist named Steve Sheehan. And he brought so many percussion instruments into the studio, things that I'd never seen before, like a glass organ. Yeah, which was an amazing instrument that you play by kind of dipping your hands in water and then stroking these glass rods that are amplified into these big cones. And his imagination was off the charts. I mean, you know, you have to know when to utilize somebody's skill set as a reader, and then when to let that alone and let somebody do what they do and let them use their own creative input.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the magic of this endeavor we call music is, you know, I mean, in fact, please give it up to Doug and Martin because, man, they're adding a lot of magic to this music. You know? And there's so much to be said about playing music in the moment.
Yeah, and the rewards for you as the musician and the audience all kind of come in that ephemeral situation.
Right. You know, it goes back to what we were talking earlier about doorways. You know, these are doorways that other musicians are opening. You know, and I got to say, that was a funky bass solo on that Payday. Oh man, that was killer. You're too young to be that funky.
He's been building a house.
It
Seasoned him.
I've known Martin's before he was born.
Yeah, yeah. I want to mention quickly also the fact that you're with Martin and another great group of players tonight, Snug Harbor, with the music of James Black.
Right. Yeah. Looking forward to that as well.
Yeah, that's both tickets available to both shows, as far as we know.
Probably.
Yeah. So put that on your calendar, ladies and gentlemen. 7:30, 9:30 shows down at Snug Harbor, not far away down Frenchman Street. We got time for some more music. Let's hear it.
Let's hear, we're going to play one. Well, give it up for Fred. Thanks. And thanks for having me, Fred.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
We're going to play a song called Humpty Dumpty by Chick Corea.
Hey, putting Chick Corea's Humpty Dumpty back together again, ladies and gentlemen. That's Doug Belote on the drums and cymbals. Doing great work at the bass, Martin Mazakowski. And our very special guest, ladies and gentlemen, wonderful composer, pianist, producer, arranger, Larry Sieberth.
Thank you. And thank you, Fred, and thanks to the Jazz Museum here. And hope to see you tonight.
And to these folks, yeah, come see us at Snug Harbor. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.